So many times when talking to people about flat Earth, whether in videos or just in personal conversation, I find myself coming back to this point again and again about how enclosed cosmology and this whole flat Earth topic ties together so many of the different conspiracy theories and conspiracy topics that I've been looking into for many years beforehand. And yesterday I just came across this podcast of Derek Gilbert interviewing Stan Deyo talking about Tesla and Donald Trump's uncle and free energy and all this stuff. And once again, I thought it was just another perfect example of how all these discussions, in this case Tesla and free energy, which when you actually stop and listen to the way they try and synthesize it with, Copernican cosmology and break it down, it just really doesn't make sense. But when you think about it within the enclosed model with an electric flat Earth, it just fits. So I just wanted to share this clip and then I'll talk some more.
Well, again, to somebody who I'm kind of a fan of science, but I can't, in no way a scientist. But this is, the idea of pulling electricity from the atmosphere using an antenna, just without having to, fire up a generator powered by coal or oil or water, turning a wheel, or some sort of work being done. The idea that the atmosphere is doing the work for you by charging the earth and charging the upper atmosphere and then moving them like, the metal plates in Dr. Trump's experiments. It just seems counterintuitive. Why if he had stumbled onto this and then Dr. Morey had developed this, why is this still not in use? Why aren't we seeing this being developed as a source of clean energy? We're talking about clean energy initiatives, and it all seems to deal with giant solar collectors that are frying birds that fly too close to the collection plates.
Yeah.
Why is this not being used?
Well, I don't have an answer for it other than that the industrial complex that could benefit by it may find it too difficult to go to his kind of energy and spend those decades switching infrastructure over to adopt it. You would have thought that, especially in the last two administrations, that this would have been pushed to the forefront as far as their global warming agenda, which is rubbish anyway. But
Right.
Is it because they're reserving it to later when they can control everyone in a global government and that no one can use the power without their permission? They want total control over you. And in physics, mathematics, and physics, the definition of power is the flow of energy from one place to another. And so absolute power on this planet is the control of energy and the flow of it, because none of us, function without energy flowing from one place to another. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. That's why oil has been, and control of the supply thereof has been so important to geopolitics over the last 100 years.
So you can see that if we had a way, which we do, for the household person that's an electronics guy to make a free energy atmospheric electricity converter like Morey's,
Yeah.
that would be a thorn in their side, because you could go off grid and not be subject to the control of the flow of energy on your property.
Right.
Now, they would like to have it, but they want to be able to control everyone's use of it. And the only way to do that is to make all the continents and countries of the world under one global legal power system.
Mm-hmm.
That way, they can say, you can't use power here, you can't go to Europe and use it, you have to have a permit or one of our devices that we monitor to use it. It's illegal otherwise, and they could enforce it then as a global initiative. And they would have complete control of the flow of energy on the planet then. And that's, I think, why they didn't develop it here, because they didn't want it to get away. But that video I've given you there is, to the clever Tesla enthusiast and whatever, is a way to get that energy very quietly and use it yourself.
Well, that's something that is of interest. Sharon and I would go out of business. They would just find a way to control it.
Yeah, okay, and that's what they're about, so fine. Why bury it, Anyway, the mystery in Morey's writings was, he said, this energy is not like you tune into a certain frequency. He said, it comes in waves, like the waves of the sea on the shore.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you get a king wave, and sometimes you get a bunch of little waves, and sometimes in between. He said the big king waves that come on, and hit my antenna will produce enough power to run that 10,000 watts for maybe 5 seconds in one pulse. So I thought, why didn't he understand where that was coming from? This irregularity he's talking about is what's called a center wave of the solar wind as it hits our outer atmosphere. It's a charged wind from the sun, and it varies all the time. It comes out in spiral arms from the sun, so there's very intense solar wind periods, and then there's less intense, and then another spiral arm we pass through as we orbit the sun. But these particles of iron and copper and various other things and protons, they hit the atmosphere at the top out there with such physical force. I mean, these things are, some of them traveling at 1,000,000 miles an hour, so that's appreciable. And they hit the surface of the outer atmosphere and actually cause physical shock waves to go through the entire ionosphere and down into the atmosphere of our planet. Now, Dr. Trump and I talked about the atmosphere. The atmosphere acts like the inside of a simple two-plate capacitor. It acts like the dielectric, which is what stores the mechanical charge in a capacitor. The surface of the Earth is like the other plate, and the ionosphere at the top of the atmosphere, that is the other plate of a two-plate capacitor like he was playing with.
Oh,
So,
okay. All
so
right.
think about it.
Yeah.
These particles are hitting it, and they're moving that outer plate to and away from the surface of the Earth. Small amounts, but all the time, bang, 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 like this, right?
Yeah.
That physical shock wave going through the atmosphere below is something that you can tie into and siphon off as electricity.
Huh.
Now, there's a way to do that, and I'll tell you now, Maury was quite a...
Okay. So I just thought that was really interesting because obviously on the one hand, I think as many of us are starting to come into an understanding more and more, and when we look into the whole topic of Tesla and tapping into the electrical currents of the Earth itself, and he mentions like the dielectric model there, really, in the two plates. On the one hand, he's really onto something, right? And I think many of us would agree that it's not just complete hogwash when you're talking about the whole free energy topic. But at the same time, from now I look at it and you can see where the breakdown happens. Especially when he starts talking about how, well, I know how it happens because it's when the solar wind's hitting the ionosphere, and which I suppose sounds reasonable if you're not really thinking too closely about what the ionosphere supposedly really is. And when you really look into official explanations of the ionosphere, they don't even really know what the ionosphere is in terms of where it really begins and how thick. I mean, it's just kind of a word they use that has this very ambiguous definition. So to speak of the ionosphere as a plate that would work in the same way that the experiment that he's referring to really breaks down, in my opinion. But if we go back to thinking about all the possibilities within an enclosed system where you don't have to come up with these convoluted ideas of particles from the sun traveling and hitting, making an impact on the ionosphere, which itself is supposed to just be charged particles. So it's just particles hitting particles, and that's creating shock waves, which then can be converted into electricity. And we could probably pick that apart all day, so I'm not going to spend time doing that. But conversely, what I thought was really interesting was how, on the one hand, he's talking about them, essentially hiding this, or why aren't they developing this? Why they want to control it? They want to keep it from everyone, and so they have to get the system in place to, they're trying to get the system in place first in order to, maintain control and just the whole globalist agenda, which it's ironic because now looking at it, we can go, well, now looking at it, the other alternative explanation is one that nobody seems to think of, and that's the idea that it's not so much that they're suppressing it until they have the ability to control it. Rather, it's the idea that they've been suppressing it and controlling it this whole time by way of all the other pseudoscience that they've injected into the mix, whether it be Einstein and relativity or gravity and everything in the quantum fields. And the more I kind of look at all these topics and how they kind of interrelate with each other, it does seem to just increasingly seem to be the case where, obviously, with all these topics, whether it's electrical engineering or chemistry or astronomy or just whatever branch of physics, take your pick. Of course, there's all elements to which they work. There's all elements to which there must be truth embedded into them. But it's the whatever you want. It's the electromagnetic connections between all of them, which has really been, occulted, as it were. It's been hidden, and this is why when you get into things like free energy, I think, and cymatics and Tesla, again, it's another one of these topics it's just kind of a perfect gateway for so many people into the esoteric and into, occult sciences, because, in many ways, by definition, this is an occulted science. So it seems, if Tesla's been suppressed and Tesla's got truth to it, if there really is truth to the whole free energy behind Tesla, you know what I'm saying? It lends credence to the idea that there must be something to all the occult sciences that they're into and that they're hiding from us. So it's really deceptive in that way. But again, when we come back to just the simple idea that really what you start to realize is that essentially what they've succeeded in doing is just compartmentalizing a field of study that really is essentially just one thing, a whole spectrum of manifestations of sort of the same core thing, whether you want to call it electricity or magnetism or, sound or vibrations and frequency. It's all the same thing. And so suddenly the idea that there's electricity up in the atmosphere itself and you can just harness it is really not a crazy idea at all, when you're able to kind of look around you and basically look at the sun as being, so the sun is electric, the moon's electric, the stars are electric, the wind is electric, the tides, water is electric and magnetic, sound is electric, everything, heat is electric, our bodies are electric, our brains are electric, our heartbeats are electric. And then when we start talking about even things like the soul in the spiritual realms, I really have no way of proving anything at that level, but to me it seems like it's again, we're talking about different manifestations of the same underlying energy, the same source. And I know that sounds very new agey, but the more I look into this, I think that what we're used to, most of what you find out there is the new age spin of something that there is a core truth to it, and it really does kind of simplify and unify so many of these sort of disparate, compartmentalized studies and theories and things out there. And even just going back to Genesis 1, where God said, "Let there be light," it's the first thing He created in all of creation. And when you really stop and think about that, you realize that, well, would that just mean, visible light that we can see with our eyes? Because we know that visible light doesn't even encapsulate all light on the spectrum of what we call light. And so, really, I think it means is that God created, He created energy, He created electricity, He created whatever this, the Bible calls it light, but it's in everything. It's in all of creation. And again, so which makes more sense? As we're continually coming back and looking at all these various topics and theories and going, well, there's something to this. There's something to this free energy thing. Tesla was onto something. They suppressed him for a reason. He wasn't a total quack. But does that really make sense with all the other stuff that the mainstream science is trying to sell? Can you really merge, these free energy ideas and electric universe ideas with a cosmology that hinges upon gravitational theory? And you see lots of people trying to do that, but ultimately it just falls apart. So there we go.